Hey, Book Dragons, it is your girl Lindsay from the Spine Bookshop. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Spine Bookcast Chronicles of a Bookshop. I am here with my friend and the first poet that the bookshop ever had, Clarence Plank. He's written some really amazing children's books, Life of Penguins and The Dance of the Blueberry Ball, and then he's also known as the Shoebox Poet, which we'll get into why. And some of his poetry books are Words for a Muse, The Shoebox Poet, and Cosmic Beauty, Midnight Musings, and several more poetry books that are in the shop. So you'll have to go and get them. How are you doing,
I'm
Clarence?
doing pretty good. How about you?
Good, good. So let's get into it. How did you get into writing and reading? How'd you get into reading?
Uh, I got into reading because when I was in the second grade, I had to do like a developmental thing because I read at a slower pace than what the class was, and they wanted me to
Okay,
try to bring me up to speed. So because I didn't read the normal what everybody else read, I read comic books, magazines and newspapers and stuff like that. Um, But there was a lot of times I did go to the library with my mom, and she did, I did get a lot of books and stuff that to check out to go home and read as a part of that.
sure,
And I mean, but it
right,
was really hard because my mom worked second and third shift, and so it's kind of hard for me to get those books back on time.
right. So, what was the first book for you that, like, the minute that you did it, done, sealed? That was for me. Reading is for me.
It was a comic book, Spider-Man 79, and
I love that you know what issue it was. That you've said that before, and I absolutely love that you know the exact issue.
I mean, it was the first comic book that my grandmother got me, and being at the
Okay.
being there and seeing Spider-Man on the cover with this lady who's a robot, or
Uh huh.
who's trying to kill him. So
Sure.
even though you're jumping in the middle of the story, it still was something of an interesting read because I enjoyed Spider-Man, the Incredible Hulk, Wonder Woman, and all of those growing up.
Yeah, so you were a DC kid like me. I was kind of Marvel, but I was definitely more DC because I'm a Spider-Man girl, or I'm sorry, I'm a Superman girl. Kevin and you would get along because he's a Spider-Man person too.
I mean, I met Kevin when we were at the for the anniversary show or anniversary event.
Right.
Yeah, him and
Yeah.
his wife were really nice, and it was really great being able to meet them and talk to them about things.
Well, I love that as I've gone along on this journey of running my own bookshop that focuses on local authors, watching the relationships between the different authors like develop and grow has just made me so happy.
I need to expand on that and talk to more authors and stuff about things. It's just for me being a poet and a children's book author it's a little bit more difficult to talk to somebody about. I mean, you can talk to somebody about what they're writing, working on. People don't really go into that talking about wanting to talk about poetry that much because people feel that when it comes to poetry, you have to have a degree or a PhD to really understand it, and you don't
Hmm.
because if you love
Right.
music is just it's poetry set to chords. That's all it
Sure.
is. And I mean, if you anything that a lot of times the
Well,
beat resonates more than the lyrics.
well, that's how I had a teacher in high school that was how she taught me Shakespeare was, and my mom helped too, but it was like, Shakespeare wrote in a certain way that think of it like music. You have a certain like what did she say? like you have to say it in a certain way, and I think that applies to poetry too, is that there's a certain rhythm. That's the word I'm looking for. There's a certain rhythm to poetry, and all the grammar and punctuation indicate that rhythm
Mhm.
of how you're supposed to read it. So I absolutely agree with you that it is word set to, without music. So
And I mean, there are a lot of spoken word artists and poets who do, you know, perform in perform their pieces in this in almost a sense of it being set to a rhythm or a stylistic verse or a version of things. And they are
sure.
phenomenal uh, people just to listen to them as they talk about things, especially when it comes to political or certain mainstream views on things. I'm not really a political person when it comes to things like that. I might you know
Right,
say
right,
one
right.
thing here or there, but beyond that, I deal with other stuff. I'm a lover. I'm a lover, not a fighter. So
I love it. Do you have a poet that you particularly like a whole lot?
I do. I like Robert Frost
Okay.
and some of
Yes,
the
I
things
do
that
too.
he's done. But I
Mhm.
lean more towards Edgar Allan Poe and
Oh, absolutely.
his stylistic and his versing, things because the macabre and all that. Um,
Oh, for sure.
it's just that.
Well, and so I'm sorry, go
No,
ahead.
you go ahead.
Well, so we recently got a poet who is a 16-year-old girl named Autumn Grace.
Hmm.
And I read some of her stuff, and it's amazing for a 16-year-old. And she's written three so far. And she said that she's working on another one. So I love that we have a second poet because I do want to grow our poetry section. And I very much want to do like a pop up one night somewhere where we can do like an open mic night
Hmm.
and maybe encourage more people to come out and read poetry and that kind of stuff. And so I'm definitely working on doing something like that. What do you think it is about poetry that people who love poetry love so much?
The way that poetry is for me, in a sense, is that poetry is writing about a moment that happened, and you're
Okay.
living in that moment. And a lot of times, people go and and they go by that because they want to live in that moment of where something was created. Either it was the feeling of love or the connection they had with somebody or that feeling of loss and
Uh huh.
remembering somebody that that
Sure.
dying or they ended up leaving or breakups or just a happy moment when you just happen to be outside on a warm sunny day and you want to recall the smell of flowers and or watching honeybees go from plant from flower to flower. It's things like that that you want to be able to hold on to that memory.
Okay, okay. No, yeah, absolutely. Um, do you remember when Biden was elected and the girl that spoke at his inauguration, Amanda Gorman, and she read "The Hill We Climb," and it was a spoken word poem. Did you ever hear that?
I did.
What were you, I personally was very moved, and I thought it was amazing to see someone like a poet laureate speak, and like hearing, you look back at people like Martin Luther King Jr., with the "I have a dream" speech. And yes, that was a dream, but or I'm sorry, it was a speech, but it's also to me very poetic in what he said. And what do you think the difference is between speeches and poems, and like trying to think of how to ask this. What do you think it is about poetry and the way that it's delivered that makes that particular poem so iconic and lasting? For example, like with Amanda Gorman's or the "I Have a Dream" speech and that kind of stuff. Like, what do you think about poems like that or speeches like that make them so iconic?
The message that they were trying to convey or getting across to people. And a lot of times, people, if they're truly open minded to accept the message and to understand it and comprehend,
Uh huh.
um,
Uh huh.
that's what makes something iconic because people are able to grasp onto that message and do their best
Okay.
to follow suit on that message.
Right.
And I mean, it's a
No, I
it's a it's for for the black community, for them, they've made tremendous strides in the things that they had to overcome, and they still suffer some kind of persecution today in some way, but they are still finding the way to overcome those things.
sure, sure. I definitely agree. Do you have so I know that you like Edgar Allan Poe, which I do too. He's absolutely one of my favorites. And I mean Robert Frost has got the what is it? The Road Not
Yes.
Taken? Okay. I was like I have to trust my memory here and it's not that great. Do you have a particular poem by someone specifically that like every time you read that poem that is like the poem for you?
The poem that for me is called La by Cummings. And
Okay.
it's basically a leaf falls. And how
Okay.
the words are lined up on the page, if you look at how they are set up, you can imagine that it's a leaf falling from the tree as it floats down to the ground.
So you're saying that the position of the words are also important with the words themselves
Yes,
can sometimes be important.
yes.
Okay.
Because I've seen
My
people that have started poems and they have written, they have the words trailing across the page at an angle, and you follow it as you read in either zigzag lines or in a whirlwind. In that case, the poem is basically about a whirlwind.
I love that. I've never thought about that before. That's I really like yeah. And I can think of several poems now that you said that where the words are kind of scattered on the page and what have you. So
And
I love
it's the
that.
creative side of how people do certain things and how they represent their poetry. For me, that was something
Sure,
that
sure.
I did when because I'm self-published, and when I went into format my books, I really considered about how I was going to do that. And if
Sure.
you take and you open the book and you look at it, the word it looks like an audio file from how somebody's talking.
Sure. My favorite poem, and I remember the first time I heard it, I absolutely was floored because it was just, I'd never heard anything like that. And that's the Pablo Neruda poem, Sonnet, and I stink at Roman noodles, but it's XVII. Is that 17?
I think so.
Is that right? Yeah, that's the one that's I do not love you as if you were salt, rose, or topaz, or the arrow of carnations the fire shoots off. I my favorite line in the entire poem is I love you as certain dark things are to be loved in secret between the shadow and the soul. And I remember when I read that, I absolutely was just holy crap, you know. And then there's also that's one that is one of my top favorites, But the other one that I really like is gosh, I the one that's I am the captain of my soul poem. That's what everybody calls it. It's Invictus by William Ernest Henley.
Hmm.
And I love the last two lines is I'm the master of my fate, I'm the captain of my soul. And I just those lines, just the poems themselves were amazing, both of them, but having a specific line just slap you in the face that you have to sit there for a minute and just think about it because it's just hit you so hard and it resonates with you somewhere deep inside. And I really love that poetry has that ability to do that. You're absolutely right with sometimes it just hits on a feeling or an emotion or a memory. And I think that's what's so amazing about reading is what is it the quote that if you don't like reading you just haven't found the right book, and I think poetry applies the same way. If you don't like poetry it means you haven't found the right poet for you.
Yep. Now, for me, when it comes to writing, I don't rhyme at all often in my books. I don't follow a
Hmm.
specific meter. I don't follow certain things. For me, I've always looked at the poems that I write as a conversation between you and I, and so basically me and the reader. And
That's
I'm
cool.
asking, who, what, when, why, and how during that
Okay.
conversation that you and I are having. And if
Huh.
we're talking about love, we're talking about grief, we're talking about a sunny day, or we're talking about clouds, or we're talking about an animal, or if we're talking about loving somebody dearly, you know.
Okay.
So for me, I've always looked at, um, and I catch a lot of flack when it comes to about poetry, about my poetry and stuff, because some people see me as a simp, because I don't put women.
What?
I don't put women up on a pedestal kind of thing, but yeah, people look at me as a simp because of all the things I say about worshiping a woman and stuff. I'm just like, I'm not worshiping a woman. I'm just basically telling you that this is a beautiful creature here who is smart and intelligent and has so much to offer the world, but people don't see that.
And I you are not a simp. I think that you are an incredibly talented poet. I just because if I have downtime, I will occasionally pull one of your books off my shelf, and I'll read through a poem or two, and it's just you have this amazing ability to make words come alive. So don't listen to haters. I always joke that you guys are my poets. I adore you all tremendously, and I will not have someone disparage you. So you are not a simp. You're an incredibly talented writer
Well,
for
I
sure.
appreciate that. And I mean, there are times that I don't let it bother me about what people say. People are going to say what they're going to say. I read the book,
Sure.
Memoirs on Writing, by Stephen King,
Uh-huh.
and he talked about that. And it says, like, as a writer, you're a bigot, you're sexist, you're all kinds of different things. You're because of how people see you when you write certain things. Even though
Sure.
you're telling a story, people assume that that's you, when in a nutshell, you're
I
not.
love that you mentioned Well, I love that you mentioned Stephen King because our one of our previous episodes we discussed Stephen King with Lloyd Elmore Jr.
Mhm.
and he loves Stephen King. And I mean, he's absolutely. I mean, you guys are both absolutely right. Like people, and that. So one thing that I'll say is that people will take your words and completely like, it always used to kill me in English class where you would have someone say, "Oh, well, the author's intention is this," and how do you know that? How do you know that that's the author's intention? I don't think that's the author's intention. And that's the one thing that I really love about words in general, or books, poems, what have you, is that you can put one poem on someplace and have 15 different people read it and come away with 15 different
Yep.
reactions.
And that's the thing that I learned a long time ago is that I am not responsible for the image your mind creates of me.
Okay.
And that's the truth of it. You know, you
Right.
may see me
No,
one way,
I agree
you may see me
absolutely.
one way, but I'm not that person.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. And I think that if you don't know someone and you read their words, and I'm guilty of this too. You absolutely get this impression of someone from their words, and that's one of those things, like, don't ever meet your heroes, because they're never going to live up to what you have in your mind. But I will say this for you: you are one of the kindest people that I know. And and I've said before that one of the things that has made me so happy is that I've gotten to be friends with all of you authors, because it's inspired me so much, and getting to know you guys has just been incredible.
Hmm.
um what are you doing, like, what are you working on now?
Well, currently I am working on a another poetry book, and it's
Okay.
called A Hint of Poetry, but it's not going to be done to
Okay.
probably end of this year. So the main thing is
Okay.
working on that one book I was talking to you about with the about the Pack Horse Library project. Library.
Oh, yep, 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 I remember we talked about that.
Yeah, and because it was something I was really interested in, and I really wanted to explore that, and I think it would be something good. And also, I have several short stories that I've written. I've been trying to go over them and do and trying to edit them because I want to publish them at some point. And
Right.
before my mom passed away, she wanted me to write a story that she had, and or she had
Okay.
talked to me about, and I thought, and I want to. It's not gonna be the way she told me about it because I'm just like, "Mm, yeah." So I don't know. The premise of the story is basically there's a woman who's like fighting in like the Gulf War or something like that, and she ends up um, being knocked out and wakes up a in like a castle or something where she's with and she's with a prince and stuff, and ends up falling in love with him, and uh
Aw.
and I'm just like, don't know about that. I say you're
Not your style, huh?
not my style. I just like I have an idea for it. I'm just like I don't know how mom would feel about it, but so
I love it. I love it.
yeah. So it's just
So, do
go ahead. I'm sorry.
have you ever written, like, a novel or anything like that, or are you just strictly poet?
No, I actually have written a thriller for Nano. It's over
Ooh,
50,000 words, and I finished it. I actually finished it with
nice.
55,000 words. And
That's amazing. When are we gonna publish it and read it?
I got to go back and work on it because I know what I really want to do with it. Because I really want to have it set in two different kinds of realities, kind of thing. Um,
Okay.
and I'm just trying to figure out how to do it because I had to go back and I had to take it apart
Sure. Sure.
um, to be able to do it. And
Sure.
that's why it's just basically the first draft. But I said there's a lot of things I really, really, really need to do. And somebody pointed out to me that the reason why you are having all the problems you're having is because you're not doing the things you are meant to do.
Oh, that's really good advice. I
And
like that.
and it's like, and I'm sitting there just like, you're telling me this, and I get that, and I understand and appreciate that. But you really
But
don't when your poetry is a different animal compared to what somebody who's writing fantasy or science fiction or things like that. It's a completely different element. And as I said, people if they're not really interested in that, um,
uh-huh.
or in poetry, they're not going to give you a
Uh-huh.
second thought. They're going to go and look at, somebody that's writing a fiction novel uh, or something different than wanting to sit down and read poetry.
Sure.
So it's
So,
trying to sell that, to other
what do
poets.
you mean
So,
what do you mean it's a different animal? Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
well, it is, and people feel that you need a PhD, PhD or a degree to understand poetry,
Mhm.
and you don't. If you love music, and everybody has a different thing. So some people like the beat. Some people, when they're depressed or feel a certain way, those lyrics, they hit home. Well, the lyrics are just poetry, just set to music. That's all it really is.
Sure.
So you don't have to have
Right.
any kind of higher education to be able to understand what somebody's saying because there's a certain line or a certain word in there that's going to resonate more with you when you're feeling a certain way.
Right. Right. I can agree with that. When did you write your first poem out of curiosity?
I wrote my first. I guess I wrote my first poem when I sent it to Lisa, and that was back in 96, 97.
Okay.
And
Okay.
now, are you talking about the first one that I had published?
No, I'm talking about the very first poem that you ever wrote.
The very first poem I wrote, I just was what I sent to Lisa, a girl that I had met on through like one of those something like America Online back during the 90s,
Okay.
and
Uh-huh.
we started chatting and talking, and I wrote a poem to her, and
Oh,
started
I
sending
love
other
that.
poems back to me, and it started going back and forth. Now, I saved all those things on a computer, not hers, but mine,
Sure.
because
Right.
that was her stuff, and I've always been that way.
Sure.
That's their stuff. I don't use their stuff, and
Okay.
unfortunately, it's the biggest thing is like when you're a writer, back up, your backup, your backup when you save something.
Oh boy, have I learned that lately.
Yeah, my computer crashed and it took every poem that I had, every
Oh
original poem that I
no.
had. That's why I started, um, because I was really kind of shy about having my poetry, so I kept it on a hard drive and everything. Um,
Right.
so I started putting whenever I write anything on shoebox, not shoebox, but peanut bags, scraps of paper, napkins, anything. When I was out,
Uh,
I would put it in the shoebox. And
Sure.
over the years, all that poetry and stuff was in that shoebox. And all I really needed to do was
Sure.
just go back and edit it. Um,
Right.
Now I can't tell you what the poem was about because as I said,
Sure.
it's gone. But I know,
Right. Right.
I mean, it was about her, but what the physical what thing it was, I don't know.
Okay.
So,
No, I think that, how old were you, if you don't mind me asking?
22, 21, 22.
Okay. Okay. Sure. Um, so have you ever thought about, excuse me, doing some kind of anthology with all of the poems that you've written up till now?
I thought about it, and I was going to be the fifth or sixth book that I was going to do. I was going to put everything together in like an anthology for that,
Sure.
and I just got
Sure.
away from it because um, remember when I said, remember I told remember well, basically from our conversation, I collected everything in a shoebox. It's a Voight shoebox, and it's the high top
Right.
one. I wear a size
Okay.
14 for a shoe size, so it's a pretty
Gotcha.
decent sized box. And I've had that box
Right.
for over 20
Sure.
some
And that's how you became the shoebox poet.
right, and um, that went from a shoebox to a bunch of notebooks to another hard drive. So I have tons of poems that I can just publish in books and not even have to write anything else.
Okay.
At least about 5 or 6 more books.
Okay. Sure. Sure.
So
Um, what do you find both the easiest thing about writing poetry and the hardest thing about writing poetry?
the easiest thing about writing about poetry is um, when you find something that inspires you to write. You know, if it's like um, certain, because certain songs that have inspired me to write, certain situations have, or I remember somebody, or I'm pissed
Sure.
off.
Sure.
And then the hardest thing is when you don't have anything. There's no inspiration. There's no voice inside your head that's talking to you and telling you what
Uh-huh.
that to feel something. You become numb.
Okay. Okay. So how do you deal with that when you're sitting there and you have that, I what do they call it? Writer's block or whatever. How do you tend to deal with that when that does happen to you?
Um, I'm still trying to figure that out.
I think that's a common problem for a lot of writers, honestly, because I get that a lot is I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out.
Well, I mean,
What advice would you give to poets that are
I would tell them that stop and take a deep breath.
okay?
Relax.
Okay.
You're not writing a sonnet or something that's going to be a need now. Kind of thing.
Sure.
Like demand on writing on demand kind of thing. That
Okay. Okay.
uh, trust your feelings
Okay.
and what you think and you feel about things or the situation as
Okay.
a whole. Live in that moment
Sure.
That's
No, that makes sense.
um, because I mean, there's times I wrote poems just about moments that I've shared with different people, and just bringing out those things. And a lot of times I might do picture prompts or word prompts or something just to be able to try and find a spark. Um, Music, as I said, helps. There's a lot of times there's some bands
Okay.
that I've listened to that kind of like, okay, I'm getting something kind of I'm getting some kind of juice from this, listening to this.
Okay. Do you have a favorite like playlist put together for you, or do you just kind of get on there and listen to whatever?
I tried that on YouTube, and the commercials
Mhm.
just don't really
Oh
mesh.
god, they drive me
Oh
crazy.
God, yes. And then um I have music that's on my computer that I will listen to, and I've tried to
Okay.
to make different little soundtracks to listen to. And
Sure.
it's no longer a soundtrack. So at some point it's just it's like an epic movie going on. You got like 50, 60 different songs in that playlist, and it's like all of a sudden you're about halfway through. The player goes like, "I'm tapping out. I'm tapping out. I'm done. I'm done." Computer freezes up, and you're like, "Dang it!"
No, I absolutely have several playlists that have an obscene amount of songs on it. So I totally get what you mean.
Uh,
Do you have one song in particular that's like your go-to song for writing?
yes. There's a band called I Prevail,
Okay.
and they have a song called "I Don't Belong Here."
Ooh, that sounds like a good song.
Um, it and you and looking at that, because they also have another one on there called um, oh crap, it's "Let Me Be Sad,"
Okay.
and they're both deal about different things when it comes to grief. I think from a certain point of view, the one that's "I Don't Belong Here" uh, deals a little bit more with suicide. It's just a vibe I get
Yeah.
from that. Um,
Sure. Sure.
and the other one, it was a song that I played the hell out of it when I found out a friend of mine had died.
Oh.
So she was a number one fan, and she loved my poetry to death. I mean, um, and it was difficult losing her because we met through Con of Thrones, which is a Game of Thrones convention that started in Nashville through Mischief Manage. And they also do the Leaky
Okay.
Cauldron, which is the Harry Potter convention.
Okay.
And I met her through that, and the girl's name was Danny, and she was a very kind, compassionate, warm person, very free spirited person. I don't know what
Okay.
happened, and it's kind of regretful for me because, talking to her friend because I had just saw her, um, that Sunday. Her and her daughter, we went to an anime day down in Huntsville because that's where she lived at,
Okay. Okay.
and um, a week later, I found out that she had died, and it was
Okay.
a shock because I was like, "Wait, what?" and
Yeah.
then finding out that she actually died 3 days later, and
Oh, that's terrible.
nobody
I'm so
really. I
sorry.
don't know if she, committed suicide or she had some kind of health problem. But talking to a friend of hers, she was there 2 or 3 hours before that. And she was actually thinking about spending the night, and my friend told her, said, "Nah, I'm fine." No, um, and the last conversation was
Uh-huh.
about me, and I'm just like, okay, why is my name coming up in this? So that's that. Um,
Sure.
there's that thing of, why is my name coming up, and then all of a sudden this, so it's just like there's a tone of regret there because I don't know and nobody's
Okay.
really talking.
Sure. Right, right, right.
So
No, I get that. Well, we're almost out of time, but I would like to read something that you did for me that no one has ever done before for me. And it was absolutely the kindest, most lovely thing that anyone has ever done. And I have this framed. So I have this bucket list. And occasionally I post an update about my bucket list of things that I want to do in my life, things I want to experience. Well, one of the things was I want someone to write a song about me. And you wrote a poem about me that was so beautiful, it almost made me cry. And I've never had anybody do that before. And I would like to share with ever. It meant, just in case you don't know, you have absolutely no idea how much it meant to me that you thought this. And when I posted it, a lot of the other authors that are in my shop have come in and have repeated the same sentiment that you have in this poem. And Kenny or Clarence, you go by both.
yeah.
Um, it's confusing sometimes, but and I asked you what do you want me to call you, and you were like, you can do both. That's fine.
Mm,
But you wrote this poem about me, and this is not an ego thing. This is me being appreciative of our friendship and that you were kind enough to put our friendship into words. And I love that. So I'm going to read this poem for you. Make believe. She holds the key to the world of make believe. She is the guardian of pages and secret places to unexplored worlds of wonder. She is the goddess of words and the gatekeeper to all things, hidden between the covers of books. Her authors, she calls them, and with care of a saint. She lays our words bare for the world to see, written upon the pages of genres big and small. She is driven by the inspiration from the letters of authors who sit on the shelves in her bookshop of dreams. It is here. Oh, I lost my page. Hang on. I'm so sorry. Give me one
no
second.
worries.
It is here where she is the queen of literacy and offers you a chance to escape into the wonderful world of magic written between the pages of her authors. Lindsay Schultz, thank you for everything. When you sent that to me, I got choked up. Like, I just want to thank you for writing that about me, and I've never had anything like that. And it just goes to show the impact that people have and the impact that words have, in reading what you wrote. Sometimes I've always wondered, oh gosh, am I making a difference with my bookshop? And then you write something like this, and my readers always give me, or not my readers, but my authors always give me such amazing feedback about what I do for them. But it's so easy for me to do it. It's not work.
Hmm.
And I just, I want to thank you so much for writing that because it was so lovely. And I read it a lot whenever I'm having a moment of doubt or I'm stressed out about something with the bookshop or I think something's not going to work. I have that printed out and laminated on my desk and I read it occasionally, and it just reminds and it gives me strength. So I want to thank you for that because it's incredible and your words are incredible, and everyone should read all of your books because your words are incredible. And so I just want to thank you for that.
I I appreciate it, and I do mean, and I mean I do mean it wholeheartedly because you know you are the first person that I have reached out to have my books in your bookshop. You know, and
Uh-huh.
I've gone through other bookshops and asked and been turned down because of being a self-published author, being a poet. You know, because the first thing they ask you is like, "Oh, can you bring people in?" You know, I have a following, but
Sure.
I lack the grasp of holding on to them to build them more to where I can get more people to come out to things. You know, and for
Sure.
me, that's what the frustrating part of it is. But I'm going to try
Oh, I'm sure it is.
to encourage people the best I can. I'm going to try and do the best I can to write stuff. And anytime that somebody that does try to help me or give me help, I do appreciate them and I'm going to show them the best I can. And that's why
Right.
I felt that, you need, because I know you've been dealing with a lot of stuff, but, I felt that, you needed something like that. And I did a poem for another person and, um, she liked it. It's just getting back, well, as I say, some people see, the different things I say to, to people or how I write and everything, and what people, come to assume about things, is like
Right.
I do things for people because I want to help them just as much as you want to help people.
Oh, same.
Uh,
Yeah.
People may say like, well, he's doing this for this or he's doing that for that. It's like, no, I generally want to help people. That's why I'm always,
And
I mean,
I think that's become a rare thing is the desire to help people because like I've said it before, when I started the bookshop, nobody really catered to local authors and I didn't understand why. And so I contacted my boss who was on 2 weeks ago, Janine Hernandez, and I remember asking her like, how hard would it be to do local authors? And she said, all you basically need is a consignment agreement. So I always found it really like how hard is it for you to give them a consignment agreement and put it in the shop? It's really not that hard. So it's absolutely been my pleasure, and it cost me nothing to put you guys in my shop and to try and help you guys, and you guys have given me so much back in return.
and I mean, that's why I try to, whenever I run into an author, I try to, mention, the spine. Or if I'm at some place and I run into, spoken word artists or poets, and I'm just like, hey, there's this group here in Nashville that does this. There's another group that does that here. If you want to do certain things, and I mean, it's just trying to help, people to see that there are opportunities around here. And I mean, when you're
Sure.
able to have a place to be able to, to do like to do like an open mic, there are a lot of poets that are down at MTSU, and they're that you could probably reach out to. So I mean, you
Yeah.
definitely have.
Well, if you are a poet and you're a writer, whatever, and you want to put your book or your poetry book or what have you on a shelf, I'm the person to contact because I've said it repeatedly. I do not say no to people. If you're a writer, I will put your book on my shelf. I will find space for you on my shelf.
And I mean, I've been telling people that, and because I mean, people need to have that opportunity.
Sure. I think so too.
I mean, I can't.
Well, Clarence,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
No, I say that.
No, go
I
ahead.
mean, there are times when I'm like, it would be nice if, to be able to sell more books and stuff, to be able to help you out and what's going on with you, and it's just,
Sure.
um, hopefully at some point, you know.
Yes. Well, Clarence, I want to thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking with me today. As always, I love talking with you. And thank you to our listeners. And definitely please check out the Shoebox Poets books at the Spine Bookshop. And if you are feeling generous and would like to help us on our move to our new location that's coming up, details will be forthcoming on that. Please definitely go to our GoFundMe link, which I will include on this episode, and just donate a little bit, because all of your donations go to help the Spine Bookshop help more writers and do more events for writers. So, Clarence, thank you so much, and I hope everybody has a great day and happy reading.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.